Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Broke Up, Not Broken. If you're going through a divorce, don't worry, you're not alone. This is your one stop shop for mastering your life and your finances throughout the entire divorce process. Today, we're thrilled to have Ed Parcaut with us. Ed is a seasoned mortgage broker and the founder of Lending for Living. He brings nearly 3 decades of experience in mortgage lending and a deep understanding of the real estate markets. Ed's work extends into various media, including hosting the Real Estate Jerky talk radio show and the Inner Edison podcast, where he offers insights into achieving homeownership and financial literacy. He also served as a hospital corpsman in the U.S. Navy, which enriches his approach to client service. Thanks for your service, Ed. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So listen, if you're feeling overwhelmed by your divorce or your current station in life, please don't be. Ed is here to help us break it down so you can feel confident and prepared by creating a clearer picture of not only your financial situation, but how you can tackle the personal challenges you might be facing along the way. So grab a cup of coffee or your beverage of choice, buckle up. Let's once again get you personally and financially empowered. Ed, it's amazing to have you here with me, man. Thanks.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So we were talking on the lead up here to this conversation that we have a lot of the similar experiences with divorce and finances and everything else. So you went from a hospital corpsman, and we kind of lived in the same general vicinity here in San Diego, California. And then you made it up to Modesto, where you reside now. Like, how did you get in? How'd you go from Navy medical corpsman to doing the work that you're doing?
So I started up in Turlock, which is right down the road from me as a kid. And I wanted to get out. I wanted to join the Navy and see the world. And I got to see San Diego. So, because I was stationed pretty much my whole time at Camp Pendleton at the hospital, and this was the old hospital, not the new hospital. So I didn't have the luxury of the new place. And after I got out, I got my bachelor's and master's. I got my bachelor's while I was in, and I was finishing up my master's. So when I got out, I still had about 6 more months of my master's. And so I realized medical field wasn't for me. I wanted to be in business. I didn't know what that really was at the time. A couple things happened where I was in different things where did stuff through the military exchange systems because that's what I knew. And then this whole process was coming to an end, and my neighbor owned a mortgage company. And I said, hey, and this is in Oceanside, right? Because you're right outside the base there. And so I started in the mortgage industry going, wow, this is really great. I can actually help people change their trajectory of their life and their family and everything else. Because once you own a home, everybody else in the house now thinks they can own a home. And that's what I focus on. I want to help people understand that home ownership is where you want to get to in life, period. And I don't care if it's now or in 10 years from now, you need to own a home.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like the happiest people and the wealthiest people that I've worked with in my 20-year career as a financial advisor are people that own homes, and in some cases own multiple homes, so they rent them out and they get that income that's coming in and so on. So it's just very tough to do, especially when you're in it's really tough to think about when you're in the throes of a divorce or preparing for one and really trying to get yourself through that process. But I would concur. I think home ownership is where it's at for sure if you're going to build any long-term wealth.
And stability, right? I mean, for the longest time up until 2020 through 2022, in the middle of it, whenever you went to buy a house, it was always more expensive than renting. Always, right? 600, maybe $800 difference. I don't know where it is. I mean, it's very expensive all over. So it depends on where you're living. In the Midwest, it's different. But then during that pandemic that we had, it was, wow, it's cheaper to rent. It's cheaper to own than rent. And then it was, oh, it's the same as renting. So nobody thought about the thought behind of owning till again now where it's more expensive than renting. So most people think I should just rent. The problem is in a 5-year period, in about 5 years, that whole diagram, or I can't even talk today. I don't know what day it's after the holiday. I'm trying to come back. You got me on a Monday. But when you look at, okay, when rents are here today at a certain level and owning a home is at this level, in a 5-year period, that's going to cross. And then it's going to be cheaper to own than it is to rent. And the one thing about owning is you own it. You can do whatever you want with it. When you rent, you have someone else's control over what you can do. They might say, hey, we're going to sell the house. You have 30 days to get out. And then you've been in this low rent payment for so long. And then now you have to go up 5,000. 1,500 a month more in a payment because that's truly what the rents are. And in California, there was a rent control that was put in, but that rent control is not protecting the renter. It's really now protecting the landlord, which means in order for them to stay compliant, they have to raise your rent every time it comes due by 8 to 10%. And so
So,
be careful what you wish for when you hear all these things about rent control.
yeah, you have that built-in cost of living adjustment for anybody that's owning property and renting it out. So I'm going to ask you, because people ask me all the time. I have conversations every single day with our current clients, prospective clients about their financial planning needs and so on. And my crystal ball is incredibly fuzzy when it comes to this stuff. But you're the expert here, so we're recording this in July of 2024. Where are we headed from a real estate perspective? Like, what does this market look like? I know here in California, it's kind of weird right now. At least it feels weird to me, and I'm sure all over the country people are feeling the same. Scratching their heads a little bit. So what are we dealing with now? Where are we headed?
Well, I get asked all the time, when is the best time to buy real estate? And our statement now is 10 years ago or today. And the reason we state that is because you can't buy it 10 years ago and you can't, so you have to buy it today. Where are we going? Well, rates are where we're at. Average rates that we've ever had over time is typically 6%. If you go back in 2008 through 2012, that's what it basically was. If you go back further than that, it could be even higher than that. So rates will eventually come down. Are we going to see the pandemic level rates? No. We'd have to go back to where they closed down the whole United States again and have that type of a recession, because we were in a recession. We just didn't realize it because they told everybody, go home. You can't work. Go home. And so we're not going to see those rates again. The lowest rate I ever saw prior to the pandemic was 3.25%. And that was a VA rate. I do a lot of veterans loans because I am a veteran, and it's just something I do really well. And so rate wise, don't focus on rate. Focus on long-term, what your plan is for your future. Where are you going to be? If your plan is going to be to move to a different state in 3 years from now, go buy that property in that state today, rent it out for the next 3 years, and then move there in 3 years from now. Don't wait to buy that place in 3 years. Buy it now.
Yeah.
Certain locations are having issues. Florida is starting to have some issues with values and coming down and people buying. Well, they have stuff there that we never have. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have humidity. We don't have a lot of the stuff that they have. And but one thing we do have the same there is a lot of people commute to where they work, but some people don't anymore. So just long term, the question you want to know is, where's real estate going? Nowhere but up. And if you look at in California, we're supposed to build 250,000 homes a year to keep up with just population growth. That is just normal growth. That's not what's coming across our border, any of that kind of, I'm not getting political, but we're not counting any of that stuff. Just normal households being created by families, 250,000 homes a year. If you go back the last decade, we barely built 120,000 homes a year. Last year, we only built 70,000 homes. What does that mean? We have a major crunch on how many houses we need in California and the amount of people who want those homes. People are going, well, you're losing so many people out of the state of California. Great. The only way we're able to sell a house or put somebody in a house is because somebody's leaving. So during the pandemic, when people left from California, everybody's like 750,000 people in that exodus over so many years. Well, if they wouldn't have, we wouldn't have had no houses to sell.
Yeah.
Because when we were putting people on really low interest rates, the first thing I said to a bunch of people was, you know what, we're shooting ourselves in the foot right now. We're going to make it to where they're not 85% of existing homes are on the market. It's going to go down to like 40 to 50. Well, I was wrong. It's 35%. And that is job transfers. It's really not really happening right now. Divorces, which we're talking about today, and deaths, right? Those are the three things that are causing people to make changes right now only. Nobody's going, I've got another baby coming. We need one extra room. Let's do that move up. They're going, that's going to cost me $1,500 more a month. That kid can be with the other kid for a little bit longer. That's what you're running into. But then there's one thing you have to be very careful, and might offend some people, but these low interest rates are abusive relationships, meaning that you'll stop doing what you need to do because it's comfortable. You don't want to make that change. That's what I'm talking about. You have to do what's best for you. Now, because you got such a low interest rate, you can't make that change. You have to move on. You can't stay in that relationship with that rate just because it's better for you by a few dollars.
Well, you're either going to be a hero or you're going to be a hero in one way or another, right? Because if interest rates go up, you've locked in a much lower interest rate than where you are today anyway. And if interest rates go down, then you refinance and you get a lower rate, and you're a hero either way.
Right. but rates today are probably going to stay right around here and eventually go a little bit lower, but it's going to take a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why. So the great, I said this earlier today on my other daily show. I said the word Greenspan, and I didn't mean to. I meant to say Jerome Powell.
Yeah.
And so the Fed is trying to do something they're trying to slow the economy, and what they're trying to do is like a family on a budget. So if you have a mom and dad and they put a budget in place, but only mom's on the budget and dad's not on the budget, it doesn't work. Well, that's the same thing that's going on right now. You have a government and Fed. They're trying to put everybody on budget. And the government's saying, no, we need to spend more money and spend more money to do this, and do this, because if we have it out there, they can't take it away. Well, we're never going to fix this inflation problem if they keep spending. You can't. It won't work. It does not work. Go back in history, look at all the different times. It doesn't work. It has to be painful and they have to stop the spending. And that's the only way we're going to get out of this.
Yeah. It's the same way on the investment side. We do a lot of work, my wealth management company, where we help people with their retirement plans and their goals and investing and estate planning and insurance and all the stuff. And it's a very, very similar conversation. The one thing people always come to me with is, when should I start getting invested? When should I put money in the market and so on? And see, it goes back to just what you said earlier, which is I remember very, very distinctly when I first got into this business. I used to work for a big name company, a company called Morgan Stanley. And one of the older advisors there, he had been there for probably 30 years at this point. So he was been around the block. And he had this little sign on his desk, which I always chuckle at, which is every day is a bad day to invest. Right. And
Right.
I still think that's one of those mantras that I think about even to this day. I mean, like you said, you either need to invest 10 years ago or you start today. Right. But which way is the market going to go over time? Historically speaking, we're going up, and if you're not on the train right now, you're losing out. So, for those of you that are listening, our message to you is there's never a bad time to invest. Right? It's now's the time to get started, get on the train here, moving forward, and hang on for the ride for 5, 10, 20 years, whatever it is, and likelihood is that you're going to be in a much better position, moving forward.
And you might need to do something with somebody else to buy it. Or, so right now there's so many programs out there, but Fannie Mae came out with a program where if you buy a fourplex, and you're going to live in one of the units or triplex or duplex, you can get in for 5% down.
Yeah.
Which means you have 3 other people or 2 other people helping you pay for your mortgage. And this is the first thing I would tell people to do with their kids. Help their kids get into properties this way. Get the 5%, they can have that as a gift 5% and help them get in the properties, and then work it out with them and say, hey, until you buy us out of this and refinance us off or whatever, we get part of the equity also.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking to figure ways to do certain things. If you got to move out of California because that's where everything is, then move out of California and buy a house somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, Detroit has it where you can get in there for 175,000 to 200,000. I know you got to live in Detroit, but there's opportunities elsewhere for people.
Absolutely. But all good advice. Now, on the topic of divorce, right, let's talk a little bit about, I have some questions for you on, kind of like if you're going through a divorce and then after divorce, which I think is going to tie into some of the things we've been talking about already. I tell people all the time, we are helping people prepare for, navigate, and recover from divorce. So if we're in the navigation phase of the divorce, we're kind of in it. We've said we want we dropped the dreaded D word, and now we have some of these decisions to make, right? So what are some of the main considerations we need to think about as we're headed through a divorce with the mortgage?
Well, it's going to depend on how's everything set up. Do you have, what I mean by that is every single one of your cards is with the other person, or have you been set up? So I've been divorced twice. So the third marriage, I told, this is the same thing I tell everybody: before you do anything at all, make a list of what you want in somebody. Not that you don't want, but what you want in somebody. I mean, down to the particulars. On my list, and we'll get back to your question in a second, but on my list, the only thing my wife wasn't was 5'9". I said I wanted some, because I'm 6'2", so I always wanted somebody taller. Never happens. But I also said I wanted somebody as a professional who was in a totally different industry than me. I knew that they could possibly have 2 to 3 kids. Well, she had 3 kids. I ended up adopting her 3 kids to go along with my 2 I already have. But the whole purpose was this is my list, and I only dated those people, period. If somebody was not on that list, I didn't date them because then you're just wasting your time.
Hmm.
On her, which I didn't know at the time, she had a list also. She's a nurse. And the one thing she said on there, she didn't, she wanted a firefighter because she thought she wanted to be gone every other night. And then come to find out, when you actually find somebody you really love and care about, you want to spend all your time with them. And so so make a list. When you're going through a divorce, the first thing you don't want to do is focus on that, but you really need to focus on your future. And this is the same thing I had to do during 2008 through 2012 is I did a lot of life counseling for people going through short sales and other stuff with their property and having to walk out. It's the same thing. It's just like a divorce what they're going through. You still need a plan for your future, like you guys are saying to do, right? Same with the house. What do you do with this house? Well, are you a stay-at-home mom? How much are you going to get? Are you getting child support, alimony? It's going to depend on what that long-term looks for you. It might mean you have to sell the house and put that money aside in something else for a while until you can buy something. We don't know. Again, I don't know. Every situation is going to be different. But if you can purchase, then purchase. But a lot of times people go through a divorce, and the first things one of the people do is they don't pay their bills. And they're both on all those cards. And so that affects you.
That was one of my next question is how do you manage the credit impact, right? Like how does someone protect or rebuild their credit during and after a divorce, right? Especially with dealing with joint mortgages and different loans.
Again, it's going to depend on the situation. Usually, a lot of people say we have a great, we're going through a divorce. It's amicable. Then I always said, excuse my language, someone's getting screwed. Then if it's very amicable and somebody's not happy, if everybody thinks they're happy, that's like it used to be when you go to a car salesman to buy a lot and you think you got a really good deal, you realize they really screwed you because you think you did such a great job. And I'm sorry if I'm cussing on your show and I'm not
Totally fine. Totally fine. We'll look it out. No, I was only kidding. We'll definitely keep it in.
Well, you have to focus on usually one person is going to be bitter and the person being left is usually the one being bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, right?
Yeah.
There's not a perfect divorce. If it was, then you'd stay married.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And so so the question is, how do you deal with that? Well, it depends on the situation. Was the mortgage always on time, but all the other stuff was bad and they're all separate? And one of the reasons I was getting at when I was telling you that list is we kept our finances separate this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend that's what everybody does. Yeah. Whatever you bring in, you put into your account, and then you have a joint account and you split the bills per whatever percentage of how people make money. And then that way, if something happens, it's not going to affect both parties. It's only going to affect, the one who says, I can't make my bills. Well, it's only going to affect them.
Yeah.
But it's really difficult. People don't do that.
Any thoughts on strategies around dividing up property in a divorce?
Well, it's going to depend on who has what, 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, all that kind of stuff, and who needs to buy each other out. Because you can do a refinance and buy somebody out, or you can do an equity line and buy somebody out. There's many ways to do it. It's just whether or not you can afford it yourself. Because a lot of times it takes two incomes, especially down there where you are. It takes a lot of incomes to afford the average home.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything pertaining to the VA loans that we should know about? Because I know we have a couple cases right now where the wife in these particular cases is trying to assume the VA loan, and we're having some challenges with that because there are certain requirements, right? I'm not really familiar with exactly what
you have to qualify. You have to qualify for it. That's the requirement. Yeah, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was no requirement. You just had to have a pulse to assume a VA loan. Now, then a lot of people didn't make those payments, and so they changed it. You have to fully qualify for it, and it's not. I don't think it's based off of the way that we can qualify a home loan from the beginning, because when you're buying a home, and it's good. So it's the way. I don't usually handle the assumptions because it's not something I do. That's done through the lender and VA. But when I do a home loan, we don't look at debt to income ratio. We look at what's reserves or the leftover. So on VA, it's not about debt to income ratio. It's about reserves. I think when they do the assumption, it's going to be on debt to income ratio, not the reserves.
Got it.
You understand what I mean? The difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
We can push ratios like, an average Fannie Mae max ratio for every dollar you bring in, how much of it goes towards your mortgage and your other debt is at 50%. FHA is up to 56%. VA, I've had 73, 83. Yeah, because
Wow.
it's about how much money is left over, not the DTI.
Got it.
And
Got
the
it.
other problem is when people go through divorce, so whoever's paying the child support or alimony, that is considered a debt, which I think is the worst thing they could ever do. So that person can't necessarily go buy a house. Let's just say that the woman's paying for the male and or whomever the person that they were married to. I don't want to assume it's male, female only. It could be many different relationships. But whoever's paying that, say they're paying $2,000 a month, that $2,000 a month is like a $2,000 car payment or house payment that's built into the debt to income ratio. And I've been talking about this for years, I want them just to take it off of the income and then rework the debt to income ratio that way. Because if that kid was in the house or everybody was in the house, that $2,000 wouldn't count against everything because even though it's for food and other stuff, it should be looked at the same way, not as the actual debt. And that unfortunately is how it's looked at. So if someone's receiving $4,000 a month in alimony and child support, that's looked at as regular income so that they can use it to qualify for a home. But that $4,000 from the other person is a debt. So they might not be able to, they could be making $20,000 a month, but now can't afford a normal home, or low price home because that's their debt to income ratio is now messed up.
Got it. So once the divorce is finalized and the dust is settled on that, now like it's day one of their newfound life, and they're now a single person, and they're ready to start thinking about potentially buying a house. What are some of the things we needed to think about in that realm? Because with some of the software that we use, we can actually show our clients, okay, this is what you have coming in, this is what you have going out, this is what you have relative to assets, and so on. And we can literally, with a click of a button, tell them, okay, you have some purchasing power here, or you should not look at trying to keep the house. Maybe we should go rent for a short period of time, so on and so forth. So what are you looking at, or what if you're in my shoes, what are you sharing with these clients that like day one of the divorce, like what do I need to do next?
Well, first, I want to talk to them while they're going through the divorce. So I'm
Of
part of
course,
the
yeah,
process
yeah.
because this way I can tell them, okay, well, you afterwards, you're only going to make this amount of money. You're not going to be able to make that payment. Like there's just right now until something else happens. And it's going to depend on, was it two full incomes working full time and then the kids are in that house? Or is it one person stayed at home and the other person made all the money? Because then you're totally two different situation. That person who now just became employed hasn't ever had a job in the last 2 years because there's a 2 year factor of working that you need to have. And I'm not talking using, so if they make enough off of child support and alimony, that doesn't come into play, a 2 year thing. It just comes into play if they go back. So they've been married, stayed at home, kids are all gone now, and they got divorced, and now she or he went back to work, and now, but they hadn't had a job in the last 10 years. But prior to that, they worked for 20 years. Well, we're going to look at that. We need 2 years of history, and they're not going to have that. And we'll have to wait for 2 years. That's the only time that 2 year comes into play. Now, if they're going through a divorce and this whole time they're working on their nursing degree and they get their nursing degree, as soon as they're divorced, they can go buy a house right away because that nursing degree is considered a job. So if you get your degree in whatever you're going to be working in, that can be count as that 2 year history.
Wow, that's new. That's new information for me.
It's been there that way forever. It's just people.
Wow.
I run into people all the time. Well, it says you've been not working for 6 months and we need a 2 year history. Not true. We need a 2 year history, but I can use the 2 years prior to that, just get to work for the next 3 months and then we can move forward. Or if it's only been 3 months, that kind of stuff. So the 2 year history is not 2 years in that type of industry. If you were answering phones for the last year and a half and now you're an administration person making way more money, that's still 2 years of history. It's not in the same job. The only time that there's a caveat to that is if you were working for a car dealership in the service department and now you're selling cars and you're fully on commission, then I need 2 years of that commission to be able to do that.
Okay.
Right.
That's good. That makes total sense. What
So,
about,
so I want to go back. So that could be nursing, that degree, that could be hygienist. The degree you're getting that's going to, and that time that it takes to get that degree can be used for that history.
excellent information. Excellent information. One of the cases that we're working on right now, husband and wife are considering maintaining joint ownership of the property after the divorce is finalized. And this comes up a lot because for good majority of the people that we work with, it's that situation that you just mentioned earlier, where there is a stay-at-home mom, and I'm not trying to be sexist here, but this is what we see a lot. It's a stay-at-home mom. The husband's the breadwinner. They have their 2.5 kids in their house with a white picket fence. It's the prototypical situation, right? What do we need to be aware of in those particular cases, and like how can we navigate those cases so they can be successful?
Well, first of all, they have to address it in the divorce, right? And the reason I bring this up, I recently just had a transaction where they did their own divorce. Mm-hmm. They didn't address the property in the divorce. They got divorced. It wasn't addressed. And then she passed away right afterwards.
Oh,
that went from joint tenancy to tenants in common, which I learned a lot over this, from this, because, I don't deal with title, how to take title. That is not my world. That is escrow and title company's world, not my world. So it became tenants in common. What does that mean? Now that half of that property now has to go through probate to the heirs. So that took a year. And now he has to refinance and buy her out. Where before, if they would have addressed it in the property, he could have just finished the refinance because it was already addressed as joint ownership in the thing as tenants and not tenants commons. It would have been joint tenancy. They could have left it. And then if she passed away, it would automatically went to him. Or they could have addressed it in there as, tenants in common. And then they would have known what they had to do down the road to buy each other out. And so it became, a probate issue, which you never want to go through probate. And the way around that is to address this stuff through trusts.
This is an amazing commercial for estate planning, which is one thing we do with all of our clients. Estate planning and insurance is one thing we address in every particular case. And insurance, right? Because if she had passed away, let's say they had addressed it in the divorce, and they had everything dialed in, but there was a situation where he was going to have to buy out that other half or whatever. You have insurance that's involved where she passes away. There's enough cash there to do that buyout, and then everybody moves on with their lives. So that's why you always want to make sure you have some level of insurance in place to protect yourself for things like support and buyouts of certain property or businesses and things of that nature too, right?
It's like a key. They used to call it a key man policy, which they don't really call it that anymore. Key person, I guess. And basically, if you have a business and one of the owners passes away, it buys out the other owner's wife or whoever they're married to, so that there's not a destroying of the business, because that could be a problem for people. But go back to the trust thing. Most people think a will is all you need. All a will does is tell the probate court your wishes. It's the trust that keeps you out of probate.
Absolutely.
And then you save about $41,000 at least.
And in 1 to 3 years of your time, we had one case that took about 3 years to get through probate because beneficiaries were not designated correctly and so on. And you want to try to avoid that certainly at all costs.
And make sure you put in there, if anybody challenges the trust, they are now bought. They no longer have access to any of the money in the trust.
The disinheritance clause.
Yeah, whatever that's word. I don't know the word of it, but just if somebody's going to complain about it and have a problem with it.
And that's a perfect point. Yeah. I mean, and we say that, I tell this to everybody that we work with. If you think there is one person that's out there that's going to challenge you and challenge this trust, or come out of the woodwork and demand money or whatever, and just make your life miserable, you need to name them in that document. You don't have to tell them that you've named them, but you need to put the courts on notice that, hey, listen, this person is a little bit of a troublemaker, and we want to make sure that, I've succinctly and directly listed this person as someone who should not get their hands on my stuff. And usually that's a lot more helpful than not naming them. That's for sure.
Right. And it just helps with when people pass away, emotion goes crazy. And I watched it with my grandparents. My grandma passed away, and then my grandfather passed away. And then the kids just, my mom, my uncle, and my aunt, just how two of them took advantage of the other ones. And that would be my mom, my uncle took advantage of everything. And I just was like, that is not how I want to see things in life. That's just be careful. You want to have everything in writing ahead of time, so there's nothing to think about, because what happens is they want to keep you alive. Well, I don't want to be kept alive. I want to go when I go at a certain point. Emotion gets in the way, and that's what you have to go off of, what the wishes of the person are, if it's addressed in the trusts and everything else, because you can put everything in there. So
absolutely amazing advice there in that. So if you're listening, go back and rewind the last 3 minutes and listen to it over again, because it's incredible information. This is the carte blanche section of our show. So in any wherever you want to take this kind of part of the conversation, anything that we didn't touch upon, any questions I should have asked, anything you want to share with the audience that is on your mind.
Well, I have a book out and I'm not looking for people to, I'm offering it here. Just send me an email to ed@edparcaut.com. Say you want to copy my book. I'll sign it. I'll send it to you. Just reference this podcast. What I want people to understand is the process. The process changed a while back. It's very easy to buy a home. People like me, not me exactly, but people like me try to make it harder than it really needs to be. It is so easy. We can do a transaction in 9 days. I can do a VA loan in 11 days, which is unheard of for people. And what it is I've gotten everybody out of my way. And that's what's so important. And it doesn't take that long. If you do everything up front, do it right, it only takes a few days. Time kills all deals. And that's like we've had where you buying a property and someone passes away. Now that property's got to go through probate because people didn't address it ahead of time. If it was a trust, it only take a little bit longer, just a little bit longer to purchase that house. And that's why it's very important to understand the process. So feel free to reach out to me and I'll send you my book.
Awesome. Any other ways to contact you? That you just go to the website if you want to? They want to.
My website's the easiest. I have that unique last name, so when you asked about when I was in the Navy, so I was in the Navy. I was down there in San Diego because I was in Camp Pendleton, and I started acting and modeling back in the day. And so I went from Parcaut, which was how my grandparents. Well, actually, my grandparents never corrected anybody, so it was said any way possible. And I went to Parcaut, and I got a lot of from that, but it's the French pronunciation of it.
Sure.
And so being a unique last name, I'm Ed Parcaut everywhere. There's only probably about another 8 Parcauts in the country, and none of them are named Ed. So it's very easy to find me.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, I'm half French.
All social media. Yeah, all social media and everything.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we put your links up, your email address that you just gave everybody to be able to contact you all in the show notes. So if you're listening, to this and you're driving, you're not in a place where you can jot down Ed's contact information. Don't worry. We'll make sure you get access to it through the show notes. So I appreciate your time, Ed. This has been an amazing conversation. So good. Such good information along the way. And this is definitely a topic that comes up in a lot of our conversations, pretty much every case we're dealing with a mortgage, or at least somebody who wants to try to figure out how to buy a house after the dust has settled. So I'm super appreciative of your time.
Right. And back to that, the VA, assuming VA loans.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not another veteran assuming a VA loan, that veteran loses that eligibility until that loan is paid off.
That was my question. Yeah, I wasn't sure how that worked exactly.
Well, but that doesn't mean that the veteran currently couldn't go buy another house with the residual of his VA eligibility had left. Again, it's going to depend on where is that located, how much is left on that current mortgage, and all those. And we have to run those numbers to see how much is left on that eligibility, because through the Blue Water Act that came out a couple of years ago, we can now do a VA loan up to 2.5 million. Most of us cut it off at 1.5, but we can, according to VA, go that high with no money down. And if you're a disabled vet, that means no funding fees. So you'd always want to use your VA loan if possible because of how great it is. And actually, what the best part of the VA loan is, when you go to refinance, you don't have to requalify for the fact that you can do a refinance.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah. So you can it's called an IRRRL. It's so easy. That's why they're bombarded. Veterans are bombarded by so much mail to their mailbox to get them to refinance because it's so easy to do it. Don't go with the people sending you all that stuff in that mailbox. Go to the person who helped you get into that house, who took advantage, took care of you, because be careful. People through the mails, not everybody is going to be your friend. So
more amazing advice. So thanks, man. I mean, I'm actually going to reach out to my brother-in-law, who is a military veteran, and he's almost 100% disabled at this point, but they are in this area where they're kind of shopping and they're kind of trying to think through whether they want to buy a house or not. So this is really good information I'm going to pass along.
Have them call me. I'll send them my book. I haven't done my VA book yet because I did my full general one. And then now, just because VA is so much easier to buy a home than any other program. It's just so easy. And I get, my son's 22. He's an active duty Army medic, and he's in Washington State, bought his first house at 21. And I talked to him about how to do it. And basically he got into it where it didn't cost him a dime to get into it. And that's what's nice about a VA loan. Sometimes you have it set up to where there's no money needed to get in, we can get the closing costs from the seller sometimes. Not always, depends on where you're located, what's going on in the market, but there's so many different ways to do this.
Very cool. Well, I'm going to put the two of you in touch here as soon as I finish my day. But again, thanks so much for your time, man. It's all good information. Hopefully this was helpful to our listeners. And if it was, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things so you can keep up to date with what we're doing and when new episodes launch every Wednesday. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.